There is a world where our understanding of life is impossible. A realm of absolute, eternal night, where a photon of sunlight has not reached for millions of years. A world where the water temperature balances on the very edge of freezing, and the pressure reaches a crushing 388 atmospheres. That is a force of 380 kilograms on every square centimeter of a body. To be here, unprotected, is to be annihilated faster than a nerve impulse can travel from skin to brain. It is an instantaneous transformation into a mere smear of organic matter.
We are in the North Atlantic, the depth 3,800 meters. Here, in the abyssal silence of the Titanic Canyon, lies the most famous, most opulent, and most tragic object ever conceived by human hands. The Titanic.
For more than 110 years, we believed we knew its story. We watched the acclaimed films. We read the thousands of books. We peered at grainy, black and white photographs from 1912 and the murky, greenish frames captured through the tiny viewports of Soviet Mir submersibles and the American Alvin. We thought we had studied every rivet, every deck, every stateroom. But this was a grand illusion. We were observing the Titanic through a keyhole. We saw only what the narrow, trembling beams of halogen searchlights snatched from the darkness. We were blind. We could not see the scale. We could not comprehend the holistic picture of the crime the ocean had committed against man. We saw the romance, but we never truly saw the physics of the catastrophe. Then, in 2023, everything changed. The deep ocean exploration company Magellan Limited, in partnership with Atlantic Productions, achieved what was once the domain of science fiction. They virtually drained the ocean. They conducted the most ambitious, most expensive, and most detailed scan of a shipwreck in the history of maritime archaeology, creating a perfect digital twin of the Titanic. This is no mere three-dimensional model for a computer game. It is a photorealistic, forensically exact copy of reality, composed of billions of polygons. And when the supercomputers finished processing 700,000 high-resolution images, when the water finally vanished from the monitors, the scientists saw something that forced them into silence. Before them was not a romantic ghost ship draped in a noble patina of time. It was the scene of a monstrous, violent catastrophe. The sheer brutality inflicted upon this steel defies description. The Titanic did not simply sink. It was torn apart, twisted, crushed, dismembered, and slammed into the seabed with the energy of a tactical nuclear detonation.
The truth, laid bare by technology, was more brutal than any myth.
Now, we descend into this digital abyss. We will walk the decks that no longer exist and peer into the staterooms that became tombs to finally confront the unsparing physics of a legend's final, violent moments.
For more than a century, the ocean has guarded the truth, concealing the scars that a titan tried to hide. Now we confront the central question: why does this ship's legacy continue to claim its victims, even 100 years after its demise? And what truly transpired on that fateful night when the unsinkable met the eternal? To comprehend the shockwaves this new survey sent through the scientific world, one must first grasp the sheer audacity of the mission itself. This was no tourist excursion, no cinematic pilgrimage. This was a forensic data-gathering operation, a campaign of digital archaeology on a scale comparable to mapping the surface of Mars. A mothership, a solitary steel island, held its position against storm-force winds and waves cresting at 3 meters. From this turbulent surface, 2 deep submergence vehicles descended into the abyss. They were remotely operated vehicles, christened with a poet's touch, Romeo and Juliet. But their constitution was one of cold, hard pragmatism. These machines are the apex of engineering, built to operate where the weight of the ocean would crush lesser craft,
where the pressure is so immense that
Tethered by 4 kilometers of fiber optic cable, they streamed a torrent of data back to the world of light in real time. Their directive was as ambitious as it was daunting: to scan not merely the iconic bow, but the entire colossal debris field, a 5 square kilometer scar upon the seabed. Every centimeter of silt, every scattered lump of coal, every solitary porcelain plate.
For 6 weeks they toiled. 200 hours submerged in the crushing dark, moving in a relentlessing, not a single blind spot remained. They hovered mere meters above the decaying superstructure, a dance of immense risk, where a single snag on a ghost net or a rusted cable would mean their permanent entombment.
Every few seconds, a flash of light, a capture. The final tally: 700,000 individual images in pristine 4K resolution. 16 terabytes of raw data, the largest single volume of information ever recovered from the deep ocean in one expedition. Then came the digital alchemy. Using a fusion of photogrammetry and laser LiDAR, powerful computer algorithms began their work. For months, across networks of the world's most powerful servers, they analyzed parallax and shadow, texture and form, stitching each of the 700,000 fragments into a seamless, coherent whole.
And then, when the final render was complete, it appeared on the laboratory screens. The Titanic. Whole. Stripped of the water, the darkness, the myth. It was revealed in the cold, dispassionate light of truth. This digital ghost could be turned in the hand. One could zoom in to inspect a single rivet, its maker's mark still visible after a century. One could read the serial number on a propeller blade half buried in the silt. One could peer into the gaping wound where the majestic grand staircase once cascaded through the decks. It was as if the Atlantic Ocean itself had been drained away, allowing us to gaze upon its floor from the vantage of a silent helicopter.
And the first overwhelming impression was one of profound shock. This was not a sleeping giant peacefully at rest. This was a technological graveyard, a scene of utter chaos, an industrial cataclysm frozen in time. We have been conditioned by cinematic portrayals, the hauntingly beautiful bow, nearly intact, cutting through the gloom. But the complete scan revealed the unvarnished, brutal reality. The Titanic did not simply break in two. It was torn apart. It exploded from within, its innards violently turned out across the seabed.
The scan did not just map a shipwreck, it mapped the anatomy of a failure. It showed that the true violence was not the slow surrender to the sea, but a catastrophic, instantaneous disintegration. The unsinkable did not sink. It was annihilated, leaving behind not a monument, but a warning, a stark reminder that even the grandest of human ambitions can be unmade in a heartbeat, their true story waiting patiently in the dark for the cold light of truth to finally find them.
Scattered across kilometers of the abyss heap, this is not one wreck, but two, separated by a vast field of debris that maps a story of final, violent moments. Our gaze falls first upon the bow. It rests on an even keel, a phantom of its former self, projecting an aura of majesty and solemn grace. It looks almost whole, a haunting monument, instantly recognizable. This is the silhouette of legend, the prow seen in 1,000 dreams and cinematic retellings, where figures of fantasy stood at the forefront of the world. Its sharp stem, a blade designed to cleave the Atlantic waves, is now buried deep in the silt, forever frozen in its final motion.
For decades, this was the accepted image, a grand vessel that had settled gently into its eternal slumber. But a revolutionary digital scan, piercing through the accumulated layers of rust and marine sediment, has revealed a far more violent truth. The physical modeling, built upon this new, astonishingly detailed three-dimensional data, has uncovered a terrifying dynamic. The bow section, weighing tens of thousands of tons and completely flooded with water, became an unguided projectile. It plummeted toward the seabed at a sharp angle, accelerating to a speed of nearly 50 to 60 kilometers per hour. This was no longer a ship. It was a torpedo the size of a skyscraper, falling through the crushing darkness. The moment of impact was cataclysmic. A hydraulic shockwave of unimaginable force erupted as the bow struck the ocean floor. It did not settle. It collided, burying itself 20 meters into the dense silt, a depth equivalent to a 7-story building. The displaced sediment was blasted outwards, creating a crater field akin to that of a meteorite strike. The scan revealed damage previously invisible to the submersible cameras. The entire hull structure buckled. The decks, once promenades of the wealthy, have been forced upwards into a grotesque hump. Along the point of impact, the ship's sides are bent sure in the sheer inertia of its own mass. Steel plate, once believed to be the pinnacle of
And yet, amidst this evidence of extreme violence, lie details of an almost mystical stillness. On the forecastle deck, the anchors remain. They hang in their hawse pipes, immense and black, now rendered into useless symbols of a hope they could never provide. And the chains, the colossal anchor chains, with each link weighing over 100 kilograms, are stretched taut across the deck, pulled straight as a string. They are a silent testament to the unfathomable forces that tore at the ship during its final descent. The scan allows us to look down upon the skeletal remains of the spar deck. It has collapsed entirely. The wooden flooring, a handsome mosaic of teak and pine, has been completely consumed by deep-sea bacteria over the century of darkness. All that remains is the bare steel framework, a grid of exposed beams that resembles the bleached ribs of a leviathan's carcass. We can see the open hatch of the number 1 cargo hold, a gaping wound. We see the cargo cranes, their arms frozen in positions of silent, mechanical agony. But this bow section, for all its wounds, is the only part of the wreck that retains a recognizable, almost human silhouette.
What lies 600 meters behind it, across the debris field, is something that defies the very definition of a ship.
We now move to the darkest, most disturbing region of this underwater map, the stern.
For years, explorers and documentarians paid it little mind. It was dismissed as a formless, chaotic heap of scrap, too mangled to be of photographic or scientific interest. But it is within this tortured wreckage that the secrets of the final, most horrific minutes for hundreds of souls are locked. The new three-dimensional scan of the stern section provoked a visceral reaction among naval engineers, a feeling they described as bordering on nausea. This is not a vessel. It is a mangled, compressed, and twisted mass of steel. It appears as if it was fed through a colossal industrial shredder, or perhaps the very meat grinder of the gods.
Why this stark, horrifying difference?
Why is the bow relatively intact, while the stern is annihilated beyond recognition? The digital twin, the perfect virtual copy of the wreck, provided the answer. It lies not in the impact with the seabed, but in the physics of gases and the ship's final moments on the surface. When the Titanic broke in two, the bow, already low in the water, flooded almost instantly. It sank as a solid, water-filled mass.
The stern, however, was a different story, a far more terrible one. It held vast pockets of trapped air. As it sank, the immense, ever-increasing pressure of the ocean depths began to crush these air-filled compartments. The structure imploded with the force of thousands of tons of water, twisting, shredding, and corkscrewing as it fell. The violence of its descent was not external, but internal, tearing itself apart from within.
The two halves of the same vessel tell two different stories of death. One of a swift, brutal impact, the other of a prolonged, agonizing implosion. The silent, serene pressure of the deep does not preserve history. It transforms it, crushing myth into a new and more terrifying reality. And only now, through the cold eye of technology, can we begin to comprehend the true nature of the ship's final, violent passage into the dark.
It grew heavy, impossibly dense. It began its final journey to the seabed, not in a chaotic plummet, but as a glider, slicing through the water with an eerie, silent grace. For a few fleeting moments, a strange equilibrium was reached as the pressure inside and outside the hull found a temporary balance.
The stern remained afloat, a ghost on the surface, for several minutes more. Its buoyancy was a cruel illusion granted by the vast quantities of air trapped within its steel labyrinth. The enormous voids of the dining halls, the warrens of third-class cabins, the cavernous refrigeration chambers, and the engine room with its colossal cylinders, all of these spaces held on to the air of the world above. This trapped atmosphere held the stern aloft, a gargantuan, dying buoy.
But the very air that granted these last moments of reprieve would soon become its executioner. As the structure descended, the ocean's grip tightened. With every meter of its fall, the weight of the water column above it grew exponentially. At a depth of 100 meters, the pressure is 10 atmospheres. At 200 meters, it becomes 20 atmospheres. The air inside, a remnant of the world above, began to compress violently under this relentless assault. The bulkheads, engineered to hold back the sea, could not admit the crushing water fast enough to equalize the mounting pressure differential. A catastrophic imbalance built between the compressed air within and the monstrous force of the ocean without. And then, pandemonium.
High-resolution scans of the wreck reveal a truth far more violent than a simple sinking. The stern was not merely falling, it was being annihilated from the inside out. The pockets of trapped air, compressed beyond all structural limits, detonated with the force of internal munitions. Bulkheads designed to withstand the sea were blasted apart from within. Decks were ripped from their supporting frames. The steel plating of the hull, once a symbol of industrial might, was peeled away from.
This was only the beginning maximum resistance to the water. It did not slice through the depths, it tumbled. It fell in a chaotic, spinning dance, subject to immense and unpredictable hydrodynamic forces that tore at its already compromised structure. Masts, cargo cranes, ventilation funnels, and even the mighty propellers themselves were sheared away during the 2-mile descent, creating a silent, descending rain of twisted metal.
And then, the final, cataclysmic impact.
The stern struck the ocean floor not with a point, but flat, still rotating on its axis. Its chaotic tumble had increased its velocity, making the collision far more violent than that of the bow. The force was so extreme that the entire structure was compressed, its height reduced by half. Decks collapsed upon one another, pancaking into a grotesque layer cake of death, instantly pressing everything between them into oblivion.
The scans show this layered pastry of destruction in chilling detail. Between these strata of rusted steel, in spaces now measured in mere centimeters, are the remnants of hundreds of cabins, and the final resting place of hundreds of souls. The people trapped in the stern, where the majority of the third-class passengers had gathered, did not drown in any conventional sense. Their end was instantaneous, a monstrous death by explosive decompression and the complete obliteration of the space they occupied. A fate so violent, it left not even bone intact. Even in its ruin, the wreck tells a story of the final struggle. The giant bronze propellers, each weighing 38 tons, lie as silent witnesses. The port propeller is buried deep in the silt, driven in by the force of the impact. The center propeller, however, points defiantly toward the dark sky above. The ship's rudder is turned hard over, a final, futile command etched into its position, a testament to the crew's desperate attempt to maneuver, to cheat a fate that was already sealed. Between the two halves of the wreck lies a vast, silent city of ghosts. The debris field. Spanning 5 square kilometers, an area the size of a small town, it was once an indistinct smudge on low-frequency sonar. Now, with resolution measured in millimeters, we can conduct a full inventory of the catastrophe.
The image is surreal, almost maddening.
The abyssal plain is strewn with objects that belong to another world, a world of warmth, of life. Things that should be in a cozy living room, a bustling kitchen, a quiet bedroom. They are the final, silent echoes of ordinary lives, interrupted by an extraordinary tragedy, forever preserved in the cold, crushing silence of the deep. They were destined for New York, but found their final harbor in the eternal frost of the abyss. Here, colossal steam boilers, each the size of a small house and weighing hundreds of tons, lie scattered across the seabed. When the great ship fractured, they were torn from its heart, plunging through 2.5 miles of freezing water to impact the ocean fent to silent, extinguished power. Nearby, a field of debris tells a more human story. Metal bed frames, hundreds of them, lie in tangled rows. They are twisted and bent, an orderly domestic scene violently rearranged. And among the wreckage, the ghost of a grand piano. Its wooden case has long since been consumed by marine organisms, the ivory keys dissolved into the ocean. All that remains is the heavy cast iron harp and its taut steel strings, the metallic skeleton of music that will never be played again. Not far from this silent instrument lies a figure of classical grace. A bronze statue, Diana of Versailles, once the centerpiece of the first-class smoking lounge, a symbol of unimaginable luxury. She now lies in the mud, face down, one arm outstretched, reaching into the empty, black void. For decades, she was just an indistinct shape, her identity a mystery, until a high-resolution scan finally revealed her form, a goddess brought low by the crushing dark. Yet, the deep preserves as much as it destroys. Unopened bottles of champagne, their corks held fast. The immense pressure of the deep Atlantic has been perfectly counterbalanced by the pressure of the carbonation sealed within. The glass, against all odds, held. Inside, wine from the vintage of 1912 remains, aged for over a century in absolute darkness and near freezing temperatures. A vintage forever undrunk. The ship's pantries emptied themselves across the seafloor. A cascade of 1,000 fine china plates, each bearing the proud insignia of the White Star Line. Copper cooking pots, spilled from the galleys as the vessel tore apart, still gleam in the lights of submersibles. Copper is toxic to the microbes of the deep, and so it refuses to tarnish, shining with an impossible newness in a gold wire frame. And from the nursery, the ceramic heads of dolls, their porcelain faces staring out from the silt with dead, unblinking glass eyes. They lie as if they were dropped only a moment ago. Here, there are no strong currents to disturb them. It is a frozen, perfect, still life of catastrophe. Modern scanning technology allows us to see inside suitcases that burst open upon impact, or whose leather has long since rotted away. The organic materials, the leather valises, the cotton and wool clothing, have vanished. But the metal and bone buttons, the brass buckles, the silver cufflinks remain. They lie in the precise arrangement of a folded shirt or a neatly packed dress. It is the ghost of clothing, and in its form, the ghost of a person. There is one discovery, however, that silenced veteran oceanographers and brought tears to the eyes of cynical data technicians. Amidst the twisted steel and gray silt, the sonar painted images of pairs of shoes. A gentleman's leather boots, side by side. A woman's elegant heeled pumps. The heavy hobnailed work boots of a stoker from the engine rooms. And impossibly, Heartbreakingly, the tiny shoes of a child. They lie in pairs, often close together, pointing in the same direction.
The meaning is profound and inescapable. At this depth, in a chemical environment undersaturated with calcium carbonate, the human body cannot last. The immense pressure and frigid water dissolve bone. Flesh is consumed by the creatures of the abyss. Within a few years, or perhaps a decade at most, the bodies were gone, reclaimed by the ocean without a trace.
But the leather of their shoes, tanned and treated with tannins, is a different matter. It is resistant to the bacteria and the corrosive water. These pairs of shoes are, in many cases, the only thing that remains of the 1,500 souls who went down with the ship. They are not merely discarded objects, they are grave markers. They lie exactly where a body came to rest on the seabed, a final, quiet testament to a life that ended in the cold, black deep. The body is gone, the clothing has vanished, but the shoes remain, standing vigil over a place of final repose. The shoes remain, resting on the seabed exactly as they were on the feet of the fallen. They are ghostly imprints, a silent testament to the final moments of 1,500 souls. A recent scan, piercing the abyssal dark, has mapped the distribution of these pairs, creating what might be the most harrowing chart ever conceived.
Through the cold digital eyes of technology, we see the patterns of humanity. We see groups, a family. Here the heavy boots of a man, their leather long since consumed by the depths, leaving only their shape. Beside them, the delicate form of a woman's heels, and nestled between, the impossibly small outline of a child's shoes. The data suggests an unbearable truth. They were holding hands as they descended into the crushing blackness. They were together, a constellation of love against the encroaching, freezing water until the very end.
Further on, another story.
Clusters of heavy work boots lie scattered near the ship's colossal boilers. These belong to the stokers and the engineers, the men who remained at their posts in the roaring heart of the dying vessel. They fought to keep the lights burning, a beacon of hope against the inevitable, providing precious seconds for others to escape. They died with their ship, loyal to their duty, their final resting place a testament to their sacrifice.
This digital reconstruction transforms an abstract statistic, 1,500 lost, into a concrete, visual, and soul-crushing reality. Every pair of shoes represents a person with a name, a history, a family waiting, with hopes clutched as tightly as their ticket to a new life. And now, for the first time, we know the precise coordinates of their final sanctuary. It is a cemetery where shoes serve as headstones, a silent city on the ocean floor.
The creation of a perfect digital twin has accomplished what historians and forensic investigators have only dreamed of for more than a century. It has allowed us to peer beneath the veil of silt and time to see the unseeable. The starboard bow, the very point of the fatal encounter, has long been buried, plunged into the ocean floor to a depth of 10 to 15 meters. Hidden there, obscured from every submersible and camera, lay the wound inflicted by the iceberg.
Until now, its nature was the stuff of theory and conjecture. But the sub-bottom profilers used in the scan could penetrate the mud and debris, painting a picture with acoustic waves. The long-standing legend, etched into the public consciousness, spoke of a single catastrophic wound, a continuous 90-meter gash torn along the hull, as if a can opener had sliced through tin.
The data refutes this entirely. There is no sweeping gash. Instead, the scan reveals a series of smaller, almost subtle points of damage. A sequence of punctures, narrow slits, buckled plates, and separated seams. The total area of the breach, the actual holes that let the Atlantic pour in, amounts to no more than 2 square meters. It is an opening smaller than the door to an ordinary room. The question then becomes immense. How could such a seemingly minor injury fell a Titan,
a behemoth displacing 52,000 tons of water? The answer lies not in the size of the wound, but in the vessel's very bones, in its rivets and the unforgiving physics of materials. The scan shows the hull plates themselves did not tear. They were forced apart at their seams. The rivets, the millions of metal pins holding the steel plates together, were the point of failure. Metallurgical analysis of recovered fragments, now brilliantly confirmed by the geometry of the damage in the three-dimensional scan, reveals a fatal flaw. The rivets were forged from substandard iron, contaminated with a high concentration of slag, glassy, brittle impurities. In the freezing embrace of the North Atlantic, this flawed metal became as fragile as crystal. When the iceberg exerted thousands of tons of pressure against the hull, the rivets did not bend or stretch. They shattered, their heads screeching those narrow fissures through which water surged under tremendous pressure into 6 of the ship's forward compartments simultaneously.
Titanic was not sunk by ice alone. It was brought down by human choice, by an economy of materials, by the hubris of its creators, and by the brutal, unforgiving nature of metal pushed beyond its limits.
Yet, as one mystery is solved, another emerges from the digital gloom. The scan of the starboard side has revealed a further anomaly, one that adds fuel to a long-simmering debate. A distinct deformation of the hull plating in the area of the coal bunkers, specifically bunker number 6. This discovery lends startling credence to a theory championed by the journalist Senan Maloney, who has long argued that a fire had been smoldering within the bunker for days, weakening the hull from the inside long before it ever met the ice.
The ocean floor does not give up its dead, nor its secrets easily.
Each answer it yields only deepens the question, reminding us that the complete story in silent dark.
Before she ever met the ice, a secret fire burned in her belly.
Deep within the colossal coal bunker number 6, a slow, relentless inferno had taken hold, smoldering days before her celebrated departure from port. This was not an unheard-of affliction for the steamships of the era, a known risk in the vast mountains of fuel that fed their engines. But on the Titanic, this internal fever would become a critical accomplice to fate.
The fire raged against the ship's steel skeleton, heating the watertight bulkhead and the outer hull from within. For days, the metal endured a torturous, unseen annealing. Modern three-dimensional scans, capable of measuring the geometry of the wreck with millimeter precision, have revealed the lasting scar of this ordeal. In that exact location, the steel is no longer flat and proud. It is warped, buckled, a subtle but deadly ripple in the skin of the ship. The metal looks weary, deformed by a thermal assault it was never designed to withstand.
This single fact changes the narrative entirely. When steel is superheated and then cools, its fundamental properties are altered. It can become soft and plastic, or brittle and fragile. Its temper is lost. Scientific analysis concludes that the hull in this specific area had its structural strength catastrophically reduced by as much as 75%.
And it was here, precisely here, in this one compromised, heat-scarred section of the hull, that the iceberg delivered its killing blow. Was it merely a tragic coincidence? Had the fire not weakened the steel, the hull might have screamed in protest, it might have buckled and groaned under the immense pressure, but it might not have shattered and split along its seams. The gashes would have been smaller, the ingress of the sea would have been slower. Perhaps the ship would not have sunk at all, or at least would have remained afloat for many more hours, long enough for the Carpathia to arrive not as a rescuer of survivors in lifeboats, but of a wounded vessel still clinging to life.
Titanic sailed into the Atlantic already mortally wounded, a giant doomed before its maiden voyage had truly begun. This was not an accident. It was a consequence of what many now see as criminal negligence. Captain Smith and the leadership of the White Star Line knew of the fire, yet to cancel or delay the most prestigious inaugural voyage in history
was unthinkable. The secret was kept. But the ship's secrets did not die in the freezing abyss. 4 kilometers beneath the waves, a new and final chapter is unfolding. The Titanic is disappearing. It is being consumed.
Recent scans have documented a terrifying scale of biological activity. The entire wreck is draped in what appear to be fragile russet oxidation. This is life. It is a unique bacterium discovered on the wreck in the year 2010 and named in its honor, Halomonas titanici. This organism is an extremophile, a master of survival in the most hostile of environments. It thrives in total darkness, in crushing pressure, and in near-freezing temperatures. And it feeds on iron. It metabolizes the very structure of the ship, drawing energy by oxidizing the metal. At a molecular level, it is devouring the hull, converting hardened steel into a fragile, porous material that crumbles into dust at the slightest touch of a current. A comparison of scans from 2023 with footage from expeditions in the 1990s shows a catastrophic rate of decay. The iconic bathtub in Captain Smith's quarters, a poignant image from countless documentaries, has vanished, having collapsed through the rotted deck below. The gymnasium has caved in. Entire sections of the superstructure have fallen away. The roof of the Marconi room, from which the world's most famous distress call was broadcast, is poised for imminent collapse, threatening to entomb the priceless radio that gave a voice to the dying ship. The scans allow for a chilling calculation. The mass of metal these bacterial colonies process is staggering. Hundreds of kilograms of iron consumed every single day. As the colony grows, the ship thins. It is losing its structural integrity. The immense weight of the upper decks now presses down upon lower levels that can no longer bear the load. Soon, a moment of critical collapse will come, a domino effect cascading through the weakened structure. The forecast from scientists is not hopeful. It is a matter of decades, perhaps less.
The great ship is not simply rusting away. It is being digested, reclaimed, returned to the elements from which it was forged. Its slow dissolution is a final, silent testament that in the grand theater of the deep, nothing built by human hands, not even a dream named Titanic, is truly permanent.
In less than 3 decades, perhaps as few as 20 years, the Titanic as we know it will cease to exist. Consumed by a relentless tide of iron-eating bacteria, its structure will finally surrender, collapsing into a formless stain of rust upon the abyssal plain. In the face of this final, irreversible oblivion, humanity has reached for a new kind of preservation: a digital twin.
It is our only means of salvation for the wreck. A digital mummy captured in a fleeting moment before its final dissolution. When scientists first loaded the complete, painstakingly assembled model into a virtual reality headset and walked its decks, the effect was both profound and deeply unsettling. There is an unnatural quality to it, a gargantuan man-made object of intricate detail, suspended in an absolute featureless gray void.
There is no water, no ethereal blue glow, no marine life. Only the silent, colossal ruin.
Broken in two, its wounds are laid bare with a brutal clarity the ocean has always obscured. This is no romance. This is the site of a technological catastrophe, a Chernobyl submerged in the crushing dark, frozen in the year 1912. The sheer scale of the destruction is overwhelming. Standing beside the propellers, each the size of a 2-stob salute blackness of the cargo holds. You can trace the lines of the empty davits, mute witnesses to a desperate calculus of survival, and the agonizing shortage of lifeboats. You can stand on the Phantom Bridge, in the very space where Captain Smith made his final stand,
choosing to go down with his ship.
This scan has stripped away the romantic veneer applied by cinema. It has silenced the soaring melody and erased the fictional love story. What remains is the cold, unvarnished truth. Buckled steel, the physics of failure, the errors of engineers, and the unadorned tragedy of human lives cut short in the freezing Atlantic. And yet, this digital ghost has revealed secrets the ocean had kept for over a century. The survey identified strange, undulating hills in the silt surrounding the main debris field, mounds previously dismissed as natural features of the seabed. Now, they are understood as tombs. Archaeologists theorize that buried beneath the silt lie vast, hidden sections of the ship. Major components of the superstructure, perhaps even the great engines or the lost third funnel, which vanished without a trace during the sinking. The silt is a better custodian than the water. In its anaerobic silence, where oxygen cannot reach, the process of decay is arrested. If this new map allows us to look beneath that blanket of mud, we may find artifacts preserved in a state that defies belief. Inlaid wooden panels from the grand staircase, delicate fabrics, documents sealed within leather portfolios, books with their pages still intact. This three-dimensional model allows for the planning of future expeditions with surgical precision, to excavate specific targets without disturbing the rest of the sacred site.
But this new capability presents the greatest ethical question of all.
The Titanic is a consecrated grave. 1,500 souls found their final resting place within its fractured hull. Do we, in the name of science or curiosity, have the right to disturb their peace? Do we have the right to raise these artifacts from their slumber? A pair of shoes resting side by side in the silt offers a silent, powerful rebuke. Leave us to our peace.
The Titanic we knew is leaving us. It is dying a second time. The first time it was the violence of ice. This time it is the slow, inexorable work of time and microbes. It is dissolving, returning its borrowed iron to the planet, becoming one with the ocean floor. But through this monumental digital survey, it has achieved a new form of immortality.
This scan is its final monument. A monument to human hubris, which built an unsinkable ship and dared to challenge the forces of nature. A monument to human tragedy and the brutal stratifications of class that decided who lived and who died. And finally, a monument to human ingenuity, which, more than a century later, could reach down through 4,000 meters of water and retrieve this story from the deep without ever getting its hands wet. The results have shocked the world with their cruel, unflinching detail, reminding us of a fundamental truth. The ocean does.
What unfolds on the seabed is the final, silent act of a drama.
A story that began under a hopeful sun in 1912 now concludes not with a roar, but with the quiet glow of pixels on a screen.
The data is captured.
In climate-controlled rooms, servers hum, their circuits holding terabytes of memory, a digital ghost of those lost to the cold. But far below, in the Atlantic abyss, at a depth of 3,800 meters, the profound silence returns. The robotic searchlights extinguish. The darkness rushes back, swallowing the island of rust whole.
Here, bacteria continue their endless feast, consuming the great ship, atom by atom. A pair of leather boots rests on the silt, marking a path that can never again be walked, a final, silent testament to a journey cut short. The Titanic continues its last voyage, not across an ocean, but into oblivion. Technology has peeled back the layers of legend, showing us the unvarnished truth. The ocean has always kept its secrets, but for the first time, we have forced it to speak. And what it reveals is not a grand romance, but the stark, quiet reality of a tomb.